everybody, it's Donna. I hope everybody is healthy and safe and doing lots of crafting. Today I'm going to be working on these wedding cards that I made that are very glittery and bright and cheerful. We're going to be using two sets. We're going to be using the Band Together set Stampin' Dies as well as the Last a Lifetime Stampin' Dies. You're also going to need some Highland Heather. I'm using 8.5 by 5.5 for the card base. You'll also need some Whisper White, which is going to be, for the outside, is going to be 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And then you're going to need some pieces that are 4 by 5 1/4. At least 2 pieces for each card. I'm going to be using the Last a Lifetime dies that coordinate with the stamp set. I'm going to, on 2 of the cards. So I'm going to be placing the one little border one, as you see, up at the top. I'm going to send that through first, and then I'm going to come back and send through the flowery image at the bottom. And I just need to line up so because I want to make sure the trim is going to be the same, and I did that on both cards. I did the same thing on a piece of stencil material. If you don't feel that this is good for your dies, and I just simply wouldn't do it, but it worked fine for me. You could possibly find something that's a little bit thinner than the stencil material, or just use a piece of cardstock. And but it's just the stencil material is a little bit more heavy duty. I'm going to put the sentiment on the outside first on all 3 pieces. So I'm going to be heat embossing that, so I'm just using my embossing buddy. Now the first 2 I'm going to heat emboss in. I'm going to use different sentiments for all 3, but the first 2 I'm going to heat emboss with the silver. The last one I'm going to do in black because it didn't have any, I'm not putting any glitter on the last one. Now in hindsight, I actually think the silver would have been perfect for the final card, and then I would have done them all in silver instead. So just changing out the stamps there so that they're all going to have a different sentiment. Now you could change this easily up to be a Mother's Day card or even a birthday card or a thinking of you card. So after placing the embossing powder on each of the cards, I'm just going to heat set them. I found it easier to heat set it before I did the coloring because just in case I didn't want to do all the coloring and then mess up the heat setting or get my sentiment on crooked or something like that. Just using a brush to wipe away any loose flakes of embossing powder that I didn't want on there. Okay, now we're going to start some coloring. I'm using Highland Heather, Grapefruit Grove, So Saffron, and Mint Macaron for my coloring. I'm going to color them with my sponge daubers, so the first 2 I will. With all of them I'm going to sponge with my sponge daubers, but the first 2 I'm going to use, just go right over the top. Because Highland Heather is my main color, I'm taking the main flower and I'm doing Highland Heather on that one. And then I'm going to use Grapefruit Grove for the 3 smaller flowers. You just have to be really careful with Grapefruit Grove because if you put too much on it, it goes darker than what I really intended. And then I'm going to use So Saffron for the 2 kind of medium flowers, and then as well as Mint Macaron for the leaves. Now any spot that I couldn't tell whether it's a flower or a grass or it had maybe negative space or a space I didn't know, I just used the Mint Macaron, so it could be like green foliage in the background or whatever. I'm trying not to get too much on the trim outside the edge because I'm actually going to use the Highland Heather to go around the whole thing. I am putting a little bit of a halo up at the top, so it kind of extends past just a little bit. And I'm just going back in with some Highland Heather because I wanted to darken those areas a little bit. And then I will take that same Highland Heather and go right around the entire outside edge of that. I'm going to do the same thing on the other card, or the other card front. They are going to be different at the end, but just minor differences at the end. And I'm going to do that one. Once that one's done, then I'm going to do something different with the final card. The final card, I'm using that stencil that I created with the stencil material, and I'm going to tape it in place by looking through it, and then I'm going to put Post-it tape all the way around it because I don't want to get any ink on any of the areas that might show through. I just want it in the flower area and on the frame part. I'm going to end up coloring it pretty much the same way, just going through the stencil this time. So it's kind of going to have like a reversed image on the card itself. And again, if I didn't understand or didn't know what color I should do some of the spots that were open. I just did it in green because it would represent the foliage anyways. Once the flowers are all done, I'm going to take the Highland Heather and I'm going to go around the frame with it as well. It's a little bit difficult to get in there because it's not very wide to get the color in that area, but I did manage. This seems like it would take a lot of time, but it really doesn't. And the cards turned out so amazing. I'm very happy with them. Okay, now once that's done, I'm going to rip off the Post-it tape. Now that Post-it tape I have reused a couple of times, so it's not like I just used it once and it was wasted. Once I rip that off, you'll see the image underneath, and I could just leave it like this, but it was too much white space, so I just went back with the sponge daubers over top of the images that I just did. And so that means the stencil part will be darker than the part that I'm going to do right now, so the images still show up quite brightly. I just took a break there. That's why everything changed. Actually, I think this was the next day. So with Highland Heather, I'm just going to go over top of that one big flower there. I believe they're probably roses. And that you can just see that what I mean. It really toned it in and blended everything together. And then again, I did the same thing with the other colors, with the Grapefruit Grove and the South Saffron, and then the Mint Macaron. And then with the Mint Macaron, I did try to, any places that were kind of negative space that was blank, I used the Mint Macaron for that. Now after I finished coloring this, I wasn't sure I wanted to put the Highland Heather all the way around the outside like I did on the first two, because I thought it looked quite nice just the way it was. And I didn't want to take away from the border that was up there. But after looking at it, I decided to go ahead and do it all the same as I did the other ones. And I took the Grapefruit Grove and went around the outside edge. I'm just comparing whether I really wanted to do that or not. And then decided, yes, I would. So I did it all the way around the outside edge. And it did not take away from the frame that is sponged on there at all. But now looking at it, as I said, I think that the sentiment could be in the silver embossing instead. Okay, now I'm going to work on the inside of all three cards. All three cards are the same, so I'm using that sentiment, and I'm just going to be stamping it with Memento Tuxedo Black. I'm going to use my background just to line it up so I can get the page centered on my background, and then stamp the stamp right in the center of it. This way I have a visual of where the center of the card is. It doesn't have to be perfect. I just really kind of wanted it straight and in the center as best I could. And I'm going to stamp the same sentiment on all three cards. You could use your Stamparatus to align these up perfectly on each card. Because I was only making 3, I thought this was simpler and just as easy to do it this way. But if you were making multiple cards, it probably would be easier to use your Stamparatus. Then I'm going to take a stamp from one of the sets, the little tiny rose set, because I wanted something to add color to the inside. That one right there, that little tiny rose at the bottom. I wasn't sure which one I was going to use, but I did end up using the little rose one. And what I did was I just stamped it twice, kind of in the bottom right of the sentiment, and then I kind of flipped it around and stamped it in the top left with Highland Heather. Now I could easily change up the colors. I could have done so saffron or Grapefruit Grove, but I just chose to do all of them with the Highland Heather. This added a little bit of element, just a little tiny element to the cards, and made them just kind of unify it with the front. Okay, so for the Celebrate the Best Day Ever, I decided to use one of the detailed bands dies for just to kind of accent the sentiment on the top, because there's not really a lot going on in this card like there will be on the other cards. So I'm going to use that one smaller detailed band die, but I'm not using it as it's intended. I'm going to take a little kind of scrap of Highland Heather, and I'm going to attach some I think I use, yeah, Sizzix double-sided adhesive to this. Usually I don't use the double-sided adhesive that much, and yet I have lots of it, but I think sometimes I have this hoard mentality that if I use it up, I won't have it again, or I won't have it available for something else, which is really silly because I bought it to be used. So we'll use it today. So I'm just placing that on the sticky part, pressing it down a little bit, then I'm just going to take it to my cutter and run it through my cutter. Now I'm using a heavy duty cutter, so I wasn't worried about the stickiness getting on the blade at all. And then it is kind of sticking out there, but I don't really care about that right now because I don't need that part. Just going to place it on top there and run it through my die cutting machine. This is what we end up with. I do need my pokey tool just to poke out some little kind of curly cues that are in the corner that didn't fall out easily enough. Some of those in the last card I actually used, or a bonus card, I actually used those little curly cues as an embellishment. Now I'm going to cut off those tabs, which cut off really, really easily. I just kind of follow the curve around and then back up again, and it literally takes seconds to do that. And that forms the frame for my sentiment. This just kind of added a little element to the front of that card. And because it now has double-sided adhesive, it's easy for me to attach. I just have to remove the double-sided adhesive and then find the center of the card. And as long as I don't press it down, it's easy for me to remove it and try again. And when I have it where I like it, I just have to press down. And that adds a little bit of elegance to that card. Now this card isn't going to have a lot of sparkly stuff to it, but so I will add some Wink of Stella and a little bit to it. So now for these two cards, we're going to be doing the same thing, but I'm going to do it in two different ways. So I'm using the smaller pieces of the white that are left over. It's the only two pieces that you should have left over, and I'm putting double-sided adhesive on it as well, and I'm going to take it to my cutter and cut it out, and so I have a piece of cardstock with double-sided adhesive. I'm just using a little tool there to make sure it's really burnished into the cardstock. Now I'm going to remove the double-sided adhesive on one side, and I just got confused for a second because the other paper didn't fall off the way it usually does, because we're going to actually attach this to the back of the front piece. And it's easier to turn the front piece, the card front, upside down onto my work surface and then add the double-sided adhesive to it that way. I made these pieces just a tiny bit smaller just for this purpose, so that I could, if they were exactly the same size, it would be hard to line it up perfectly, and you might have adhesive hanging over the edge, and you really don't want that. So by making the back piece just a tiny bit smaller, it was easier to get everything covered without having any excess. So this will grab fairly quickly and fairly easily, so I'm just going to place it there very gently, making sure it's lined up on the sides and at the top, and then put it down. And so you can see that it is a little bit smaller, but it's fine. Now when I flip it over, all those open areas are now sticky, which is what we wanted. I am going to take some silver glitter, it's just generic glitter, and I'm going to spread it all the way across the openings, and that silver glitter will now stick to those open areas. Now, I know a lot of people do not like working with glitter. I have no problem with it. I like things that are sparkly. I left some on top, and I'm going to take just a piece of paper, or the release paper really, and use that tool to just really push it in, burnish it into those crevices. Okay, and then I'm just going to fold that ball back into the tub. And then now I'm going to take a dusting cloth after I burnished it in again to just wipe away that extra glitter. That's just from the dollar store too. Those, those like a Swiffer, but the dollar store ones. And it removes all the extra glitter that's sitting where I don't want it to be. And I find that works well. And now I have all that silvery, glittery left behind, and I think that's absolutely adorable. I did consider using an embossing buddy on it before I stuck it down, but I was afraid that some of that embossing powder would get into the sticky part, and that would defeat the purpose. Okay, now we're going to do, I just want to show you could use a lint roller too to also remove it from your desk, any of the glitter. I have done that too, but this time I'm just using the dusting cloth. Now I don't need the silver anymore, because for the next one we're actually going to use Stampin' Up's Dazzling Diamonds, which is really pretty too. It's just a little bit more subtle. But this time, instead of doing the way I just showed you with the double-sided adhesive, just in case you don't have the adhesive, I did pick up some of this spray adhesive on my last trip to Walmart, because I was afraid of being quarantined for too long and then I wouldn't have anything left to do. Or I would run out of glue, really. Not that I'd have anything left to do. You could also use your snail or double-sided tear and tape, but I just found that if you missed a spot, then you're going to miss where some of the glitter might not stick to it, and that would look kind of odd. So I'm going to bring in my spray box. I'm going to put it in that piece into my spray box, and I'm going to take it outside and just spray it with some double-sided adhesive. I did do a couple of good coats because I wanted to make sure it was nice and sticky. Brought it back because it does smell, this spray adhesive, but it did seem to work quite well for what I wanted to do it. But I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to turn the front of the card base upside down onto my scratch paper there, and then I'm going to pick up that sticky piece, and you can actually see the stickiness on it there, and do the same thing. Just lay it down, make sure the top is lined up. Once the top is lined up, the rest should fall into place as long as I keep the card even. And I smooth it down, and I will have that same stickiness in the openings on the other side without having any glue leaking out anywhere. And then using the Dazzling Diamonds, I'm going to go through the same procedure. I actually keep my Dazzling Diamonds, or all my embossing powders, in the glitters that I use in little tubs, because I found it usually I just do it right over top of the tub, so I don't have to worry about getting glitter or embossing powder everywhere. So it looks like I don't really have a lot there, but I do have, that's probably 3/4 of a tub of glitter. Doing the same thing, just burnishing it in, tapping it off, pouring it back into the container, moving it out of my way, and then I'm going to wipe off what I can and just rub it back in as much as I can. And I don't want any, because it takes away from it if there's extra somewhere where you don't want it. And that's just gorgeous as well. It's more subtle, but it's all sparkly. Okay, this is where I'm going to take the Wink of Stella and just go around in the crevices of the frame that I did, just to add a little bit of sparkle to this card, because I just felt that it needed it as well. And now all I have to do is basically put the cards together. So I'm going to put the inside piece down with some Tombow, and then the outside pieces as well with Tombow. So those are the 3 cards. Now I also did another card as a bonus card in So Saffron, which I'm going to bring in a second. The So Saffron card, I did decorate it a little bit differently. I used the little curly things from the Celebrate frame, that one right there. Just pointing out that I did put the Wink of Stella all the way around it. And here is the other card that I did. This one is not a wedding card, but I did it with some generic, kind of matched the So Saffron, that glittery stuff. I did do the Wink of Stella around it, and it turned out really pretty as well. Very nice and Easterly as well. So there are the cards today. There's some close-ups of them. I will link a couple of other videos that I think you might be interested in. They're not sparkly, but they're kind of cute. I hope everybody has a wonderful evening and stays safe and stays indoors, and, well, not necessarily indoors, but stays healthy and well. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that thumbs up button. It really helps me out to stay visible on the feeds. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.